Hello, I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we are going to explore religious, spiritual practices that are common throughout the world's cultures. With me is Dr. Roger Walsh, who is a professor of psychiatry at the University of California at Irvine. He is author of a number of books relating to spiritual psychology, including Accept This Gift, Lessons from a Course in Miracles, The Spirit of Shamanism, Staying Alive, and Essential Spirituality. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you very much.
You know, many people, if you ask them to define the term spirituality, really don't know how to define it. I get stuck myself about what does that word mean?
Well, I think we all do because it's used in a variety of different ways, but one of the ways it's commonly used, and I think which really speaks to the heart of the spiritual, is really to think of spirituality as referring to a direct experience of the sacred.
A direct experience of the sacred. That's a good term. It's rather open-ended.
It's open-ended, yes.
But certainly direct experience.
Yes, and that removes it from a more general term of religion, which can refer, of course, to institutions or to movements. But spirituality refers to our direct personal experience, so it makes it more immediate and direct for us.
And the sacred meaning something beyond our everyday awareness.
Yes, of course, what's sacred to different people varies widely, but one can think of the sacred as what's most central and essential to our lives, and we often think of it as the transcendent, the divine.
Well, the term direct experience that you've used reminds me of the term gnosis, or referring to the Gnostics. There were at one time religious traditions that specialized in the idea that practitioners should have a direct experience.
Indeed, and actually we think of that as being historical, but actually in point of fact, if you look at the heart of each of the great traditions, you find that at the contemplative core of each of those traditions, there's a set of practices or techniques by which anyone, all of us, can have a direct experience of the sacred. And those practices, be they meditative, contemplative, or various kind of yogic disciplines, all of them have in common the idea that we can train our minds, hone our awareness so that we too can have a direct access to the sacred realm.
Well, I suppose if I were to think about it, I would say that maybe you could divide these into two categories. One being the idea of purifying yourself, that when the mind is still, when you remove the darkness, the clouds from the windows of perception, you see things clearly and directly. But there are other practices that would suggest that you don't have to worry about yourself, that you can do a certain ritual or take a certain substance or experience a certain, perhaps a seance or a sacred place, a site, or something else that lifts you above or somehow removes the normal blocks to that kind of an experience.
Yes, well, you're pointing to the idea that we can think of access to the sacred coming in a couple of ways. One is more through an active process in which we train ourselves, direct our attention, learn how to concentrate, focus, and clear our awareness, perhaps. Purification, you mentioned. Other approaches are more, in some ways, more passive. There's the idea in Christianity, of course, of the difference between good works and grace. Good works, the idea that we can do something to almost earn our reward of direct sacred experience, and then on the other hand the idea of grace, that experience of the sacred is a divine gift that is, as Ramana Maharshi, one of the great Hindu sages, said, God's grace is always blowing, but we have to put up our own sails.
That's a nice term. Well, I think sometimes there is a sense that all you have to do is follow a particular procedure, a particular recipe. It doesn't matter who you are. Well, for example, if you attend a seance, and a medium goes into a trance, the medium calls forth a spirit, an entity from the spirit realm. You get to have a conversation, an encounter with that spirit, and it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in the room, it's going to happen.
Well, maybe so. I haven't had a lot of experience in that with that kind of practice, so it's a little outside my realm. My own interest has been more in the contemplative practices in which people, as you said, take up a discipline themselves and,
Yeah.
and actively transform themselves, with the idea that our usual state of awareness is somewhat clouded and distorted, and we don't usually see things very clearly. St. Paul said, we see through a glass darkly, and in Islam they talk of the 70,000 veils that lie between us and Allah. So the idea, and of course in the Indian traditions, there's the idea of illusion, that somehow we don't see things clearly. But each of these traditions has in common the idea that if we take up a practice, be it yoga or meditation or contemplation or prayer, then in some ways we clear ourselves, we clarify our awareness, and we hone our perception so that we can see more clearly and directly. So that's a more active process.
Yeah. I suppose when one looks at the difference between, let's say, an act of grace, which doesn't require that effort, and all of the work that we can do for ourselves, that maybe they're both necessary.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And of course, when we look at these practices, whatever they are, meditation or prayer or yoga or whatever, we do our little part, and then the universe does the rest, and we're actually a very small part of the equation.
It seems as if there are, one might say, pitfalls or pathologies. If you have a sacred experience for which you're not prepared, you'll have a hard time really living with it, integrating it. And all the preparation in the world may not guarantee that you'll have such an experience either.
Well, that's true. This gets us back to the idea of grace, and also to the idea which the famous French physician Louis Pasteur said, that chance favors the prepared mind. So yes, any of us can have a sacred experience, and hopefully all of us will at some time. It may come through something as simple and natural as watching a sunset, or being with someone we love, or any of the normal range of human experiences. Suddenly we can have a moment of opening in which we're laid naked to the sacred. So that can happen, but what we do with it is, as you say, varies widely. And for some people it'll just be, wow, that was a neat high. And for someone else it'll be, wow, that was truly profound. How can I live my life in accordance with this vision? How can I live so as to make that kind of experience a more frequent and deeper part of my life? What can I do to live and express the values of beauty and sacred and purity that I saw in that moment? So yes, you're pointing to the fact that each of us has a choice, and we are the agents who decide what we'll do with each experience, whether the sacred or non-sacred, actually.
And to me, there's also a sense in which really every moment is sacred. Perhaps it's a question, as Ram Dass once said eloquently decades ago, be here now. It's always there.
It's always there, and you're exactly right. And the challenge that all of us face is exactly that, to take those sacred moments and make them a more and more continuous part of life. The great religious scholar Houston Smith, a wonderful, wonderful man who wrote the superb book, The World's Religions.
Yes, who will be a guest in this series.
Oh, wonderful. He's such a delight.
And has been several times.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. He has a beautiful line in his book. He says, the challenge is to transform flashes of illumination into abiding light. Which is just beautiful. Each of us can have a sacred moment, a flash of illumination, but how do we make that more part of our life, a continuous ongoing expression of who and what we are?